Hey everyone, welcome to Dave's Bonsai. On today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about this Acadia Juniper, but more importantly, I got a comment recently on the YouTube channel. Someone asked for more follow-ups. So at the end of most of my episodes, I try to show some other trees, kind of updates, but maybe we're not showing enough of them. And I know from being a part of the Minnesota Bonsai Society, what most people will say almost all the time is they want to see trees and they want to see more trees. And so on this episode, I'm going to try to work on this one, but then I'm also going to put a lot of updates on some of the things that I've done in the past here, some recent shows, just kind of show you what's happening with that tree so you can kind of see a before and after a few weeks or a few months have gone by here. So stick around, we'll tackle this first and then we'll get some updates for you on Dave's Bonsai. Hey everyone, welcome to Dave's Bonsai. In the sense that I have a branch that splits into two shoots in here, so I'm probably going to cut this thing off right about here this fall. I've taken my knob cutter and I've gotten rid of some of that. So I just put them on the bottom, growing upwards into the bag. We fill it up with trees and then we water as we need to. We try and get rid of those air pockets. So there's a little bit of a story behind the Acadia Juniper here. So I was working at the Mother's Day show at the Como Zoo in the conservatory. We have our annual Minnesota Bonsai Society Mother's Day show, and I was doing a demonstration on an Acadia Juniper, turning it from a big old bush to kind of a pre-bonsai. And when I split apart or dug into all the soil of this tree, it kind of split off into two chunks. And this kind of fell off, and it was a really weird, odd shaped, but because I was in a demonstration with not a lot of extra time, I just kind of put this aside and kept the roots wet, threw it into some soil, and it's been in this thing for almost 2 years now. Now, what I learned recently from a function with the Minnesota Bonsai Society is one of the members was talking to me about that this time of year, at the end of August and even in early September, it's okay to go ahead and do some of the juniper varieties. Because we still have a good amount of growing time before the dead of winter sets in here in Minnesota. So I will have several weeks for these roots to kind of get established. And I also don't anticipate destroying a lot of the roots on this guy. I just want to repot it, see what's happened in the last couple of years, because it just is growing weird and sideways. It's almost like a raft where you lay down a branch and grow a forest out of it, but all the stuff was up at the tip because it just fell off from the repotting. So let's repot it today and kind of see what's going on. And we'll see if we can put it in a new pot, maybe give it a little wire or two, and shift some things around a little bit. So I got a layer of sphagnum moss on top. Keeps it a little bit moist. Keeps that moisture in there. And we're just going to go ahead and get rid of this soil here, and we'll get going. Laying down so flat, I probably didn't need to tie this thing down with wire back when I did, but I did anyway. And there, we already have it out of the pot. So this was a scraggly twig of a tree, and I just threw it into this bonsai soil about 2 years ago now. And a year and a half for sure. Was it Mother's Day of 18 or Mother's Day of 19? Either way, it's been in the pot for at least a year and a half, I guess now, and I wanted to see what the roots were doing so we could mess with this a little bit. So there we go. Not bad root structure here. This is all really new fine growth since I put it in this pot, which would have had a lot more squiggly roots. So I got this guy here that's just coming up and doing nothing. I'm gonna cut that off right away. And before I do anything else, I just want to see what this tree's gonna do. So these two higher roots right here actually did pretty good and filled out pretty nicely here. So I got some roots right there. So now what I can do with this tree is I can shorten up the bottom here, and this can become a stand-up tree. It grew like this for about a year and a half, like I say. Well, now we can kind of do it this way if we so choose. Maybe I can make it a little bit less of a slant and kind of go this way with it. And maybe we can do some wiring. So the next thing we have to do is we have to figure out a pot that this will sit into. And so I'm going to find a pot, and we'll be right back. I don't have a lot of color with my pots on my benches. And so you know what? One of the main reasons I'm going to choose these pots right now is because they're similar depth to here. This one's a little bit deeper, so that's why I might go with this one. But it gives me a little splash of color. Because again, in my backyard, I'm working on my overall garden and what it's looking like. And I think this is going to be the winner because I like the round oval here with the root structure I have left and how I'll maybe put this into the pot. I thought about this blue one as well, and it certainly can work. It's got more depth, so it'll continue to let it grow a little bit faster, perhaps, with a deeper pot. But the shape of this one, compared to the shape of the tree right now, and the way I'll curve things around maybe, I kind of like the feel of the oval one just a little bit better. So I think we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the oval one. Okay, so the oval one doesn't have any screens, so let's get some screens in there, and then we can go ahead and pot it up. So there we have the first one in. I save all my wire that I'm cutting off of trees. I got my big bucket of recycled wire. Keep it all. You're going to be able to find the size, the thickness you need for these quick little patch-up jobs and mesh jobs. So much easier. So I got an ice cream bucket that's jammed full of them. So there we have some mesh in there ready to go. I'm probably going to have to secure this with some wire because it is too skinny to put this way. And so I'll put some soil in here and lay it on the soil, and I'll probably have to wrap it in. So now I have to add some wire as well. So I can look in my extra wire too, and look at that. I have probably a big enough bit of wire right there to use leftover wire and make that one of my tie downs. So make sure you save your wire. It just makes things a little bit cheaper in the end, and I'm always up for some budget bonsai. Let's see if this one's long enough here. Might just be long enough. Because now I have a front and a back, and we'll see if we can connect these kitty corner. We'll see. I can always readjust as needed. Gonna put a little bit of soil in there. This is a little bit of my recycled soil. I'm okay with using that with this tree. It's a young tree. Now, so as you look at the tree, I've got a lot of branches growing this way. It's certainly not radial by any stretch yet. But what I do have is an extra section down here that I'm just not going to need anymore. So I can already go ahead and chop off about 1 inch of this bottom section. And so I lost some of the ramification of roots there. But I have all the roots up here, and I have all the roots over here, which we still can trim. And this made this a little bit shorter. And again, this is going to be out of the ground now. So I'm not going to have this as any aerial root right there, so that's going to go away. And this root even up here is too high up, so we're going to get rid of that one. But I'm going to leave that one there for right now. For this next couple of years growth again, we're going to go ahead and make sure that it has more time to continue to grow and see if we can keep this thing alive. So I don't have my scissors with me, so cut a couple of these off to a little bit shorter. All right. I don't want to get rid of too much of this because we want to, again, make sure that it's going to survive. So, in the pot, how are we going to put this thing tucked in here, try to get some ramification, and have it be an upright tree? somewhere right about there, I think is going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and bring these two together, and then I have plenty of space to get a little twist there. So let's go ahead and twist our wire in. And there we have it. Now if I want this to be up a little bit higher, I can stuff a little bit more soil in there and we'll keep it higher. I also could put a rock back behind there, which I think I might do. We're going to connect this front, or this back to this front. But I'm going to go around the back side of the tree so I get a little extra pressure on that back side. So I put this wire right here back behind the tree here. So again, I can get a little bit of pressure on that back side. Just enough to connect those two. And when I start to twist that one, it might bring the tree up just a little bit. Be careful with my root structure here. I'm going to undo that because I think I tangled too many roots in there. I want to be careful. I don't have a ton of roots in this juniper yet. So I want to make sure I'm not creating more problems for me down the line. This root structure here was tangled in there. I want that to just grow down there in the rocks. I want this to be more free and clear when I twist it. There. Now it's more in the free and clear. Now the tree is down more than I want, so I'm going to go ahead and get that rock I was thinking about to keep this in better shape. The tree ain't going anywhere, but I want the rock in the back, so let me go grab that rock. So here's my rock. This side is a little bit too narrow to just put back there. But if I twist it in the pot just a little bit, I get that tree to sit up there right where I want it, just like that. Trees in there. It's snug because of the rock. We're going to get this soil in there. And again, it's not quite September yet, so I'm going to have a good 4 to 6 weeks of these roots to kind of settle in place and get a little bit of movement. And then what I'm going to do to be safe this year is I'm not going to keep this out in Minnesota for the cold winter. I'll put this one in my cold frame. That way, any new itty-bitty root shoots that come out, I won't worry that they're going to get totally annihilated by a cold spell in the winter and it gets down to that 20 below range, if it does that at all this coming winter. So I will put this in my cold frame just to protect and make sure that I'm not going to hurt this newly transplanted juniper. Now sometimes we've run some workshops in September with junipers and we've repotted them and we've had success and the trees come back the next year and we do okay with them. So I'm thinking in August here I'm going to be in pretty good shape. So we're packing down that soil, getting rid of all those bigger air pockets next to that rock. We'll add some water and we're good to go. Let me get my water. Give it a good dousing of water to make sure that this is getting through all of the soil and draining really well. I have a nice little rock feature in the back of this pot now. Whether this becomes a root over rock someday or not, who knows? But for right now, we got this thing repotted and looking a little more upright. I never really expected it to be a full cascade tree. It certainly could have been a cascade tree, but I wanted to bring it upright, so I did that. Here we go. of all the water coming on out. So there we have a tree that has been fixed from laying down to straight up and down. Now the next thing I have to work on is giving it maybe some more structure with some wiring. But before I do any of that, why don't we do some updates to give you guys a little indication of what's happened to some of my trees since we last talked about them. My first update is the Christmas cactus. Now I've had some recent discussions with one of the Minnesota Bonsai Society members who wanted to see my tree at a recent event to just kind of see what it looked like, because she's pretty convinced that Christmas cactus will never really look like a tree. And that's okay. For me, that's okay for me. I like the concept of having this tree-like shape in a bonsai pot. And of course, the Christmas cactus is one of the episodes on my YouTube channel that has received the most clicks, over 6,000 views, which has been pretty exciting. And it's not even a real bonsai tree for a lot of people, right? But this speaks to that concept that, you know, tree and pot, anything with a woody substance that can split and divide and grow back bud on old wood. And you know what? The Christmas cactus does all of that. I've got the woody look down here in the first couple of inches. And does it look like a tree? Not exactly. From a distance, it kind of does. What I'm really excited about this, of course, is the blooms it has a couple times a year. So last year when I shot the video for this guy, it had a whole bunch of blooms. So I'll show you now a quick little progression of when it started, and then the blooms last year. And then I also pruned this thing pretty heavy a few months back, and I haven't done anything with it since it's been outside. So this is all thickening from being outside on my deck in full sun for most of the summer. And so it's filled out really nicely. Does it need another pruning? It sure does. But all of these tops now, most of these are going to get buds in the coming month. And when they start to bud out, I hope to get another 20 plus buds on this tree. We'll look at all the flowers, take some fun pictures, and then cut it back and do it again next year, and it'll keep getting bigger. I could put some weight on these branches right here, and I could bend these out a little bit so I get a little bit more movement because it's still more stick straight. I can do that right there. So there's things I can do here. Now it's hard to wire a Christmas cactus, but I could put weight on here and keep the weight on here so it hopefully bends in that shape a little bit more like a guy wire type situation. So this is just an update from my chop in the spring, and it's just loving life and growing, and hopefully the buds will be on soon, and I'll show you the buds on another future update since I've had the request to show more of those. So there you go. There is the Christmas cactus after the spring chop. The next update is the Amur maple. So about a month or so ago, maybe a little bit longer, we had just trimmed the Amur maple. It was getting a little bit leggy and a little bit wild, and I just wanted to give a little bit of a trim, not really a defoliation or partial defoliation. I just trimmed it up a little bit. I have this weird dieback of the trunk on the one side here. The back side, you can't tell as much. I'm not sure what's caused that, but it's still growing healthy and everything looks pretty good. So we just did some trimming to kind of just get it to be kind of a nice little rounded broom top, if you will. And it's still growing. The leaves are relatively small, and it's going to be fine to change colors in the fall, and we'll get ready for next year. But this is what it looks like just a few weeks after making those trims. No further damage, and everything continues to shoot out slowly but surely on the Amur maple. Pretty recently, I had one of my videos talk about repurposing the log into another bonsai pot for me. And so I put these willows in there. And I haven't done a whole lot since that video to this at all, except for to keep it watered. Added a little bit of fertilizer here just about a week or so ago. And I still have all the growth from where we left off. We have a few little pieces of dieback on here, right here. There was 1, 2, 3 pieces of growth on here we thought could work. They're kind of dying back. I can go ahead and cut that off right now because this one has taken over. And and this one's curling up fine, this one's doing okay. And so we have some sporadic growth here, some sporadic dead spots. This happens a lot with the willows. But one of the good things about the willow is that if it survives winter, and again, I'll probably cold frame this one just because of the funky pot I have it in, but we'll get dieback, but then we'll also get all kinds of new buds next year, and we'll be able to see this thing and how it grows and responds in year 2. All trees individually doing okay. They've got growth and a little bit of new growth at the tips. Everything's been fine here. So we'll keep watering this thing. But there's the piece of bar that I put in to keep it upright. And there we have the tri-willow in the log. And it's doing okay. We'll continue to take care of this thing. The next update is also one of my willows. If you remember, I did a fair amount of trimming on a fair amount of willows on that last episode about willows. And this one is my peninsula. And this had really big 2-foot sections out here that we trimmed back. We were trying to kind of center, or not center, trying to balance the tree overall, get rid of the strength in this center or this right branch over here. And this is a good indication of how much power is in that thick branch, because when we cut it back, and I'll show you the before shot here, what we cut it to, now that it's had time, about a month maybe, a few weeks to a month to grow, you'll notice it's doing quite well, and where it's doing the best is where this thick branch was. We cut it way back, but look, I've got this great big new growth back here. This big growth up front here, and another branch here, and another branch here. We've got 4 or 5 branches right up here. 3 of them doing really well, 2 super thick. And it's because that's where all that main thickness is from this tree. So we wanted to get more balance over here. Well, look, I got a nice branch over here that come down here is growing really nice and thick. So hopefully that's going to thicken up this branch with these guys. 1, 2, 3. So these 3 have shot out now, and this one, and this guy even here is trying to grow up in the back. So this branch will thicken up to slowly match that. But it's still out of balance now because this is so much growth right here. So I could cut some right now, right here, and get some more trimming. But this is an update show, so I just wanted to show it to you. And I think I'm just going to let it push out for a little bit longer this year. And I'll probably make a final little nip and bud here before it goes away for the winter. And again, these willows might have some odd dieback, but they grow like weeds all the time, so you're going to get new growth, and you'll be able to manipulate your tree and bend it here and tuck it there and do really good. So there's the willow on the peninsula. The view from the back, which still is a very nice shape to it. We can always turn this tree around sometime, but there you go. The weeping willow on the peninsula. My next update is one of my Japanese quinces. Now this was taken from a big repot in the spring where I took that donated tree, that big clump of quince multi-trunk type look, and these kind of fell off, where I was able to plant new ones in my plant room because they had an early bud this past spring. And so I kept these into another pot to try to grow a secondary, individual quinces. This one obviously developing into a more of a cascade style, and this one will be an informal upright of some sort. This one's thickened up a little bit. This branch is doing fine over here. I got a couple wigglies up here. I have trimmed it just a little bit this summer. And the cascade one is doing really, really well. This inner part right here, which was down in the dirt before, has formed into a nice kind of a little bit more gnarly trunk there. And I got the growth up here, which is kind of wiggling around all on its own. The nice thing about these quinces is they grow crooked and all over the place. They're never stick straight, which is awesome. And this one has some division right here, split in here, and then down here we've got the branch split into a Y here, but then this has this extra Y down in this one. 1 to 2 to 2, and this one hasn't gone to 2 yet. I'm still learning about the quinces, don't know a ton about them. This one did not flower this year. I didn't expect it to with the repot and splitting it off. I'll be curious to see what this does next year. But there's the update of the quince from the plant room back in early spring, way back, one of my first repots. And this is the end of August, and it's still doing fine. And again, I have nipped a couple of these and trimmed them just a little bit earlier in the year. So there is the double Japanese quince from the large group of quinces. As long as I updated you on the couple of quinces that came from the master, well, here's the master, or the mother tree, or the father tree. you can probably tell here, we got this multi-trunk here. And as the summer went on and I watered this things and moved it around, this guy right here is almost completely separate from the whole trunk. And this one too. This one is like the main trunk right here with this one. The one underneath is pretty entangled here, but these two here are kind of loose. They're loose down here at the base of the trunk. If you can see that movement a little bit, these two might come off next time I repot this tree. If they're not connected down below, I have even more quinces that I can propagate, and it won't be this big bush here. I've trimmed this one back a couple of times this year from longer growth just to kind of keep it in check, just to keep the round shape and see how it was going to grow in my backyard, and it's done pretty good. Again, it's got some really gnarly look to it, but here's that back piece from the back. Big old twisted weird trunk here that's separated from these other trees right here. So these two might be able to completely come apart at the next repotting. So that's how we have the big clump of quinces. And again, didn't flower this year. I'll be curious what happens next year. The next update is my Minnesota forest in a clock. If you go back and take a peek at the episode where I took this old wall clock and made it into a bonsai pot, I put all my Minnesota trees in here. Trees from the cabin, trees from my backyard that just started to seed and germinate, do all their things, all on their own. So in the back here, we have some of the ash trees that are in my yard. We have some maples. We had these in 3 different pots. So the maples, this one was a chop from an animal. It chopped it right there at about 1 inch, and it's taken off really well, really thick trunk, split up here. This one's growing fine, this one's growing fine, and even this tall, this rather skinny, this was just this little tiny, probably this thick up here, definitely thinner than the chopstick. The base here is thickened up a little bit. It's got this weird curve to it. It's already got kind of an automatic S curve on this thing, which we don't want an S curve too much on a maple. But it's got this movement, and why? Because it's reaching for the sun, and in this forest it's doing fine. So I started with the poplars. Got a poplar in the back, another chop back here. It's chopped back here, and it's kind of healing up nicely and going straight up in the air. I've cut this thing down twice up here. I've cut it down twice. And the original poplar was up front, and it had this really, right here. This is the original trunk from the poplar here. Got that last tree out of that box. We went ahead and put it on in there. So there's my forest. It's a little weak on the right side. Maybe it'll all grow in big this year. Got the nice thick tree over there, but shorter, big tall central one with the maple in the back there, and all the ashes behind there. We'll see what happens. This is a 1-year growth that had a little bit of growth this spring, just a little, this size right here. This size was right here. This is all growth this year. That's a lot of growth. Obviously twice as high probably, but twice as thick. So fantastic. And then this little guy's coming right out here. And then look at all the shoots right here, all the suckers coming right here from this root structure down here. Right now I've just left it alone. Maybe I'll thin some of it out at some point. And I got this big, really weird maple that again was chopped here. It's got these 2 weird growth right here, but this major branch up here, if I were to chop it down here, I just don't know what I'll do with it. And I got this wiggly one out here. So I've got 3 different trees. I will get an update on this tree in the fall because this will have some yellows and some reds and oranges, and hopefully it'll all start turning colors at similar times, and we'll have some really cool pictures of the Minnesota forest this year. So there is the update on the Minnesota forest in the clock pot. My last update for today is going to be the larches. So back a couple of months ago, I had the great opportunity to head up north and do some harvesting of some larches, American larches. And so with the before shots, you see I started off with 9 trees, and I just got them back into the backyard. I got a whole bunch of pumice in there, and then sphagnum moss to make sure that the moisture was staying true. A lot of moisture where they came from, so I've kept the sphagnum moss. There's a lot of moisture, and as we look several weeks in, we've got 4 trees up on top still. This one's really loving life and has had a lot more growth on some of the tips, and this guy's staying alive just fine. My back one here I thought was going to do some negative things because it was getting kind of thin looking, but look, we still have growth all the way to the top of that beautiful lichen on there to give it some texture and some age. And the bottom one of the twin trunk is still alive. And then this twin trunk right here, we lost most of the growth on the right side. Just a little bit of life left there. But the branch there, one of them is still alive. We got a little bit of growth in the tips here. So we have 4 of them still alive. Let's head down to the other section and get those too. So the other 2 are in our cluster of all kinds of trees to be bonsai someday. We've got some barberry back over there. But these 2 guys have been sitting back here since the beginning. They got full sun right now, but they spend at least half of the day in full shade. So they've never been too burnt out, high exposure to that sun, and they are doing pretty good and loving life back here in my part sun, part shade section. I did move one of my trees, and I'm going to go brighten this up a little bit for you now here. This is the one tree that's the mystery. If you can see on some of these branches, we have a little bit of brown spots on them. A little bit of brown on some of these branches, the foliage rather. And I've talked to the folks in the Minnesota Bonsai Society and a lot of the guys who do some of these collecting of these trees, and they've been pretty stumped. We've treated this with a little bit of fungus treatment, thinking that this might be a fungus, but we're not sure. So we got a little bit of that brown speckled stuff in there. But the tree is still alive, kicking out growth. This bud right here, on the tip right here, some new growth and loving life right there. Sorry, get that focus better for you. And the left side of the tree down over here, sorry about my shadow there, that side of the tree is all looking pretty healthy and no brown spots. So we'll see what happens to this guy over the course of the next year here. We've got to survive winter first. So that is the larches down in the bottom section. Well, that does it for the updates for the show. Now we'll finish out the show and put a little wire on this guy just to give it a little bit different movement. I got 3 weird branches growing up here. This one splits into a nice Y here, but then this one kind of crosses in the back, so I'm not sure what to do with that. I could cut this branch entirely off right here, and we'd have this Y here, but I'd lose a lot of foliage. Again, I want the roots to grow. I don't want to do much more trimming or cutting, but I think we can definitely bring this down a little bit more over here. We could twist some of this over here and just give it a little bit more character. So I'm going to go ahead and put on the first wire, which will go from here down to here and up to this guy right over here, maybe this back bottom one over here. So I'm going to make sure I have enough wire to go up here into the top and up here into the top, right about here. And we'll see if I can get this thing wired. All right. I'm going to start low. I have to be careful because this is really weak in here, remember, because we don't have a lot of root structure. So this first wraparound is going to be the hardest. But once I get this first wraparound, and then it can kind of come up here in the bottom part of this one to support this branch here. So I'm not going to be bending that one that terribly much. Grab here and pinch with my hands. Grab the wire and come around here, come around here. Now I have a decision to make. Which branch am I going to manipulate? It's probably going to be this one. Just because the way the wire is going, I want some movement to that branch. And we'll bring it all the way up to here. And as I typically do, I have more wire than I need. We'll be able to cut there. Okay, so there's that side. I didn't plan this bottom section right. It's got to come up here. Now I'm going to do most of my movement with this guy. So the first part of this wiring was more anchoring than anything else. So I don't mind that it's not the prettiest at the moment. I'm sorry my fingers were in the way there, but there we go, a little bit of wire around that guy. All right, so this down here is not optimal. I didn't circle around the correct way to make that work. But again, I need most of my support for up in the top, so for this wiring, I'm not going to be too worried about that. So right away, I could take this branch and do a little bit of jiggling this way, not much. A little bit this way, but then here's where I want to really bring it down. And you notice I'm supporting with my left finger here, and I'm using my finger and thumb on the wire there and twisting it so I don't try not to cause too much damage to that branch. And so there. So not a ton of movement on this one. You can bring this tip down here now, like it's getting older and longer and heavier. And we can see where this branch is going to go, and we can twist it back or up. But now we've created a little bit more of the beginning of an apex. You know, we got that maybe triangle here that'll go like this if I trimmed these branches right here. But again, you notice how wobbly this tree is. So I might have to put even a rock up here just to keep this strong from the wind and stuff. But now we have a little bit what resembles a little bit more of a tree that's going to be kind of an apex dominant over here if these get thicker and bigger. And I can still wire some of these guys right here and get more movement over here. I'm going to trim this one right here just to make it a little bit smaller. And if I put wire further out on here, what I could do is twist this so it lays out a little bit more like that. Okay. So again, longer over here, shorter over here with this kind of longer triangle shape. If I were to leave this branch completely alone and say cut it right about here, we lose some of that height over here. If I cut this one right about there, you know, I'm just looking for a spot where I can have it a little bit shorter and it'll still divide nicely. And there we go. We got rid of a little bit of the bulk over here. So again, we're getting a little bit more of a direction this way. This is still a little bit thick back here. So if I went ahead and just did a little bit of pruning here and thin that out, and what I can do here is probably curve this one around to sit something like this. So if it's growing like this, we got again that fullness from right to left, higher to lower, and it'll fill up this gap back here. We got some space back here. So I will wire these two branches next then. They're about the same thickness. I think we'll be able to use maybe the same gauge wire on that one, huh? So remember, one of the tricks to testing out your wire is that if you can move the branch with the wire, you're thick enough. This one's perfect, this one's a little bit weak. We're going to do that one for both. I did my primary structure first. Now we're going to do the secondary. And so this one I'm going to have to start this way. And we want it to wrap around. I want it to come under this branch so it can support it to move up. So I want it to come up around that one. So that'll come back over here. So I followed this wire, but now this wire is going to come underneath, right at that growing spot right there. So I can support it going up. There. There. And this one's going to come around this side, the other direction. Kind of an awkward angle on this one. Both growing the same side of the branch. And I'm going to go in the thicker of the two here. And we're going to wrap that one up right in between. There. Now, my apologies for having my body all in that, but here we go. We put it here and wrapped it around this guy here and this guy right there, so we can move those two. I gotta go up a little bit higher on this one now and find out where I want to finish this guy out. It's a little bit thick of a wire for this part up here, but if we just circle it around carefully, we should be able to manipulate the tip of that growth just a little bit. I obviously have some extra there too. Alright, so that's what we started with. You can hardly see it right now. We got the wire on there. So now, we're going to go ahead and bring this one back around here, back around there, back around there. And now we filled in that space. We got all that's filled in here. This one I can shorten up a little bit so we don't need that length right now. Boom. There we go. We filled in that negative space. Now this popped up in the process. I want to make sure I bring that back down a little bit without cracking that one. There we go. Now we have this guy just loose and free right here. And this one we'll bring up a little bit. And then back down. And there we go. So now I have some movement here with this branch to do something later on. This guy's going up more now, and we'll see where these secondary branches and tertiary branches go. And this guy's coming here to be this long one that I can now bring back down over here. And we'll do something with these guys a little bit later. And so there we have, again, eventually if this can fill out up here, we can have kind of an apical shape right there. It's still a little round right now, but if we get a little thickness up in here and body with these branches, we'll be able to have a little bit more of that shape. In the meantime, we got a little wire on there, and it's looking pretty good. My last piece of wire would be these two branches, just to give them some curve so we don't have stick straight branches. These are pretty straight, so we could put one more wire on there. So this is going to also fit very strange. I got way too much, so. So where these two connect here, this goes underneath into this branch, so these two are left kind of out there on their own. So it's going to be kind of not the best wiring for this go around, but we'll get it done. side on. All right, so now we've gotten these next two here. So we created a few more jig-jags in there. So we got branches on, or we got wire on all the branches. Made a little bit more movement. Got this one coming up and around a little bit more. This one's sticking up, so we fill that empty air. None of the branches are really crossing right now. And so I think we had a spot where we could probably call it quits and let this thing to recoup. And I'm going to trim this one to here. I'm going to trim this one to there. And now we can just let this thing heal up and we can work on it. So that is the end result. This was laying flat down on an old pot. I got it in the new pot. We put a little wire on there. A little bit of movement for this year. Let's let it grow and see what happens next year. Hey, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much. Any more comments, keep them coming in, and always try to respond and get you some of the things that you're looking for. And we'll have more updates on the next show. So for Dave's Bonsai, hey, I'm Dave Weiss. Stay safe, everybody. Keep on liking if you can. Tell other people about the YouTube channel, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, can't wait. Welcome to Dave's Bonsai. In the sense that I have a branch that splits into two shoots in here, so I'm probably going to cut this thing off right about here this fall. I've taken my knob cutter and I've gotten rid of some of that. So I just put them on the bottom, growing upwards into the bag. We fill it up with trees and then we water as we need to. We try to get rid of those air pockets.